The afternoon faded into golden tones as Olivia leaned over the balcony of her house, watching the garden. The air was perfumed with the sweet scent of freshly watered flowers, and a gentle breeze caressed her face. It was an ordinary day, but something about that moment felt different. Her eyes landed on David, the gardener, who worked with the dedication and precision of a sculptor, shaping the garden with his skilled hands. He was focused, unaware of the attentive gaze that followed him. Olivia, married to Joseph for 6 years, had always appreciated David's work. But that day there was something more. She saw him differently, as if for the first time noticing the man behind the skilled hands. The muscles in his arms tensed as he lifted a bag of soil, sweat glistening on his tanned skin under the sun. An unfamiliar spark ran through her body, something she couldn't ignore. David looked up, his eyes meeting Olivia's. The moment froze. There was something in his eyes, a silent question, an unspoken desire. She quickly looked away, feeling her heart race, trying to control the unexpected wave of emotion rising within her. Olivia didn't exactly know what she felt, but she knew it wasn't appropriate. Joseph was a good man, loyal, caring, and he loved her sincerely. But in the past few months, she had felt that something was missing. The initial passion had faded, replaced by a predictable routine. And there, in that moment, David seemed to be the answer to something she didn't even realize she had been searching for. By the end of the day, when Joseph arrived home, Olivia tried to hide the whirlwind of emotions. Yet, the presence of David in the garden, with his steady movements and focused expression, continued to echo in her mind. Something had been awakened inside her, and she knew this wouldn't end there. Olivia couldn't get David out of her head. The image of him, sweaty and focused, seemed to invade her thoughts every time there was a moment of silence. When she was with Joseph, smiling and talking about their day, she felt guilty for letting another man occupy her heart so intensely. It was as if her mind was split between two realities. The life she had with her husband, stable and peaceful, and the flame of desire that David ignited in her, like a wildfire that couldn't be contained. Sitting at the dinner table, Olivia could feel Joseph's attentive gaze on her. He was talking about his plans for the weekend, but her mind wandered to the garden, to David's hands moving through the leaves, to the slight smile he gave when their eyes met, as if he knew exactly the effect he had on her. One afternoon, she decided to go down to the garden. She wanted to see him up close, to feel the air around him. As he pruned a tree, Olivia approached, her heart racing. David noticed her but continued his work, as if aware of her presence but not showing it immediately. The silence between them was almost palpable, filled with unspoken meanings. She found herself watching his every movement, noticing details she hadn't seen before. The way he lightly bit his lip when he concentrated, or how his large hands held the tools with an unexpectedly delicate firmness. Each detail seemed to intensify the desire growing inside her. He, in turn, only smiled slightly, knowing that something invisible was being built between them. That night, as Olivia lay beside Joseph, something had changed. She was no longer the same woman who had woken up that morning. She felt divided. On one side was Joseph, her husband, someone with whom she had built a life, someone who deserved her loyalty. But on the other side was David, the embodiment of a temptation she had never experienced. The mere thought of him made her skin tingle, her senses awaken in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. Olivia closed her eyes, trying to push David's face out of her mind, but he was there, present in every breath. She felt her body warm, as if a burning flame had been lit inside her, and she knew that desire wouldn't fade easily. She had never been unfaithful, not even in thought, but now she felt that something inside her was on the verge of breaking. David seemed to know it too. Their glances became more prolonged, their conversations brief but loaded with meaning. There was no need for words. Both knew what was happening. It wasn't just a physical attraction. It was an emotional connection growing, a form of infidelity that started in the heart before manifesting in other ways. Olivia wondered how far it would go. She knew she was standing on the edge of a cliff, and any wrong move could destroy her life with Joseph. But at the same time, There was something irresistible about the idea of giving in to that forbidden desire. Something she couldn't ignore, no matter how hard she tried. The tension between Olivia and David was becoming unbearable. Every meeting in the garden, every exchange of glances carried a weight she could no longer ignore. On a sultry afternoon, when the sun seemed to melt into the horizon, Olivia once again found herself walking toward the garden, unsure of what to expect. David had his back turned, watering the plants near the wall. She approached quietly, but he sensed her presence before she could say anything. He turned slowly, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her stop in her tracks. Olivia's breath quickened, and her heart felt like it was about to leap out of her chest. "Are you okay?" he asked, his deep voice sounding like an invitation. There was no innocence in that moment, and they both knew it. "I'm fine," she replied, almost whispering, struggling to maintain her composure. But her eyes betrayed what she truly felt. David took a step forward, and Olivia remained still, as if caught between fear and desire. He slowly raised his hand and touched her face, his rough fingers from work grazing her soft skin. The touch sent a shiver through Olivia's body, as if all the air around them had changed, becoming denser. "I've been thinking about you," he confessed, his voice low, almost as if sharing a dangerous secret. Before she could respond, David gently pulled her in, his lips meeting hers in an urgent and deep kiss. The taste of him was intoxicating, a mix of sweat and earth, and Olivia surrendered completely, feeling a wave of heat flood her body. Every touch, every movement seemed to break down the barriers she had built for herself. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. Olivia touched her own lips, as if trying to process what had just happened. They stood there, staring at each other, words hanging in the air. The betrayal was no longer just an idea but a reality. With ragged breaths and racing hearts, David took Olivia's hand, and in a silent gesture of consent, the two moved away from the wall toward the lawn in the garden. There, hidden from curious eyes and shielded by the shadows of the trees, they gently lowered themselves onto the grass, as if the weight of the world had been momentarily forgotten. Their hands' touch grew firmer, and soon their bodies met in a natural, inevitable way. David held Olivia with a mix of desire and tenderness. She felt the warmth of his body against hers, and in an instant, they gave in to each other. The caresses were delicate but charged with a passion that had been repressed for so long. Under the darkening sky, amidst the whispering leaves and the soft scent of the flowers, they made love, their movements synchronized with the rhythm of the wind, in a silent dance of desire and surrender. From that moment on, their affair was no longer just a game of glances or fleeting touches. There was something deeper, something that consumed Olivia uncontrollably. Every time she looked at Joseph, she felt the crushing weight of guilt. He remained the dedicated and attentive husband, but Olivia knew that something had broken between them, something that might never be repaired. In her mind, she justified what was happening. Life with Joseph had become so predictable, so passionless, and David seemed to be the cure for that. But at night, as she lay next to her husband, the conflict in her heart intensified. How could she continue betraying a man who had always been by her side, who had never given her any reason to doubt his love? David also carried his share of guilt. He knew it was wrong, but every time he saw Olivia, it felt like something stronger was pulling him toward her. There was something forbidden, something irresistible about their relationship. They began meeting in secret, exchanging kisses and caresses in places where no one would see them. The garden, once a place of peace, had now become the setting for their clandestine encounters. Joseph began to notice the distance. He felt that Olivia was different, but he couldn't put a name to what was happening. She was more distracted, more distant, and he wondered what was wrong, never imagining that betrayal was at his doorstep. The affair between Olivia and David reached its peak on a hot summer night. Joseph was out of town on business, and Olivia knew she'd have the house to herself. David, as always, was tending to the garden when she called him inside. There was something in her voice that signaled this time would be different. They entered the house together, the silence between them heavy with anticipation. As soon as the door closed, Olivia didn't hesitate. She pulled David close, their lips meeting with an intensity they could no longer contain. The physical betrayal was now complete, and they surrendered to that forbidden passion without holding back. David's body seemed perfectly matched to hers, and every touch, every caress felt as if they were destined for that moment. Olivia felt every fiber of her being vibrate with his touch, the desire overpowering any trace of doubt or guilt. They lost themselves in the pleasure, forgetting everything around them. However, after the climax of that encounter, reality returned like a cold wave. Olivia pulled away, quickly dressing herself, her heart still racing, but her mind now flooded with a torrent of thoughts. What had they done? How could they continue living with this? David seemed to feel the same. He looked at her, his eyes still filled with desire, but also with a silent understanding. They both knew this couldn't go on. The risk was too great, and the guilt was beginning to outweigh the pleasure. The next morning, Olivia woke up with a strange feeling of emptiness. David was already gone, and she found herself alone in the silent house. The weight of what they had done crashed over her like a dark wave. How could she face Joseph after this? And more importantly, how could she go on with her life knowing that what she felt for David would never fully disappear? David was tormented as well. He knew the only right thing to do was to put a definitive end to the affair. They couldn't continue without destroying their own lives and even more Joseph's life. It was a hard choice, but they knew it was the only way out. Olivia and David met one last time in the garden. There were no more kisses, only a heavy silence, filled with regret and a sadness they would carry forever. They decided, with few words, that it would end there. Their affair would be buried alongside the flowers David tended to every day, a secret that would never be revealed. Olivia returned to her life with Joseph, trying to reconnect with her husband, while David continued his work in the garden, pretending nothing had happened. But in their hearts, both knew that the forbidden affair had left deep scars that would never fully heal. Now the garden, with its lush flowers and the fragrance in the air, would forever be a silent reminder of what had happened there, a secret buried for good. Olivia and David's affair ended without being discovered, but it left deep scars on both of them. Is living with such a secret really the best path? Does forbidden desire truly justify the price of guilt? These are the questions they will carry with them forever.